Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing some of my least favorite or disappointing finales in a series. I always hate when I've absolutely loved the first couple books in a trilogy or a series and then the last one just completely is a letdown. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to dredge up unpleasant memories and go through some of my most disappointing finales. And I have a mix of YA and adult. I actually have only 3 adult and I think I have 4 or 5 YA. So I'll go ahead and put a timestamp down below if you just want to look at the adult or just the YA. But before we go ahead and get on into the video, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box for links to all of my social media, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways. The first book I'm going to be talking about is Only Human by Sylvan Neuvel. This is book 3 in the Themis Files, which is an adult science fiction series that I read last year. And I devoured book 1, I devoured book 2, and when I got to this book, it just didn't have the same feel as the first 2 books. It focused way more on the relationship between Victor and another character who I don't really want to talk about because it will kind of spoil stuff in book 2, but it focused just way too much on their relationship. And the character in question, whose name is Evie, if I remember correctly, but that character I just found absolutely infuriating. I found her just immature, impulsive, demanding, disrespectful, and the fact that so much time was spent on her just completely ruined the whole story for me. And also, these characters in book 2 got the opportunity to do something amazing, and once again, spoilers, but they got the opportunity to do something amazing, and when we get to that place and we are following their experiences in this place, I just felt like it fell really short. The author could have allowed the characters to really delve into this new experience because it's one of a kind, and he just didn't. And the author actually focused more on political unrest than maybe scientific discoveries and other things that would have been way cooler and way more interesting, considering that this is a sci-fi novel. I was just really let down with this book. It's still a good series overall, and it still did conclude the series reasonably satisfactory, but just did not hold up to how good the previous 2 books were. The next book that I was disappointed by is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is book 3 in the Farseer trilogy. Once again, I didn't hate this book, and it definitely is one of my favorite fantasy series, but I had a lot of problems with this book. I found it incredibly slow and repetitive, and it dragged, and the whole scene where the characters, including Fitz and the Fool, and they're all traveling to the place where they need to be, I just felt that that took way too long. And once they get to the place where they need to be, his interaction with Verity and things that are going on there was just way too drawn out. And I felt like this book could have been cut down maybe like 200 or so pages just to kind of get things moving. And there was some character relationship decisions that were a little bit just awkward to me and I could never really get on board with. This book just did not, in my opinion, live up to the other 2 books, and I felt a little bit detached from it, especially the ending. But it is Robin Hobb, and you know, nothing ever works out for Fitz, and I knew that going into it, so I was able to digest it a little bit easier, but just definitely a finale that was a bit of a disappointment. The next book is Beyond the Shadows by Brent Weeks. This is book 3 in his Night Angel trilogy, and overall this is definitely not my favorite fantasy trilogy. There's more I don't like about it than I do like about it, and I actually read this before I read The Black Prism, and I was so worried that I was going to not like The Black Prism because when I finished this book, I just had a really bad taste in my mouth for Brent Weeks and his writing and how he portrays a lot of stuff, but I actually really liked the Lightbringer series, and it's almost like Brent Weeks was listening to his fans and listening to the criticism and actually took that to heart and corrected a lot of the things in the Lightbringer series that I thought were in the Night Angel trilogy. But the reason that I struggled with this book is that I felt like the ending with the self-sacrifice was just did not sit well with me. All throughout the series, Brent Weeks portrays, especially women, and I don't know why it's just women, as either being bad because you're a prostitute or good because you're a virgin, and there's like no in between. And that theme carried all the way into the third book and was kind of driving the plot. So I just don't understand categorizing women into two things that have to do with, like, you know, if they're a virgin or not. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that that kind of drove the ending of the book just blew my mind. And then we have V, who I actually really liked as a character, and she kind of grew on me throughout the series. And then Brent Weeks decided to throw in this like kind of weird love triangle, and it didn't work. And once again, you have V, who's like the bad girl because she's a prostitute, and then like the other girl who's not because she's a virgin, and once again you have that issue. So the series was definitely a disappointment for me overall, the third book even more so, and not one that I really have good memories of reading. Next are the YA finales that disappointed me. And the first one I'm going to be talking about is Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. This is book 3 in her Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. I liked Daughter of Smoke and Bone. It's definitely not one of my favorite trilogies out there. And my main problem was that the climax happened in the middle of the book, and the resolution to the main conflict was wrapped up in about the middle of the book. And when I got there and that happened, I was like, okay, so I have several hundred pages left. What is Laini Taylor going to fill it with? And I felt like she added in this additional plot line and all of this additional information. I don't really know why she made that decision. So I just felt like, I guess if you want to call it pacing, the pacing was off. I felt like the climax needed to be pushed way back towards the end of the book to have a more streamlined resolution. And I also felt like there were some romantic pairings that were thrown in this book that I didn't see the need for. And it was almost like she needed to pair every single character up with somebody else. So Laini Taylor is an author that I have had like a love-hate relationship with. I liked the series, didn't love it. I liked Strange the Dreamer. I did not like Muse of Nightmares. So I feel like she's an author that I probably going forward will not pick up any more of her work, just because I feel like overall I'm always somewhat disappointed by it. Next is Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard. This is the fourth book in her Red Queen quartet. First off, very similar to Dreams of Gods and Monsters, this book is massive, and there was no reason for it to be. This book could have been half this length. And there's just a lot of issues I had with it. First off, it's called Warstorm, and the amount of action in this book is this much. So the big conflict, like the big kind of fight that we were led up to in this book, was nothing. It was just so disappointing. I was like, are you serious? That's really what we waited for, was that just little bit right there. Really, my main gripe with this book is that it just was a lot of information that wasn't interesting. The plot lines weren't interesting. It just felt way too long, way too wordy, and the story was not that good. And the way that the story ended when Mare had to confront the antagonist and defeat the antagonist, that happened, and I was done reading it, and I was just like, felt nothing. I was just really unimpressed by it. I do want to continue reading Victoria Aveyard. I think she has a lot of potential, but this finale, it just seemed like she had a good story going and just went off in all of these unnecessary directions, and it was definitely a disappointment for me. The next book is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is book 3 in the Cruel Prince trilogy, and this book I was so disappointed in, and I think it has to do because it is shorter than the other 2 books, and most of the time finales are longer because you have more of a story that you need to wrap up, but this book is very short, and because it is very short, it felt incredibly rushed. So rushed. And just the scene where everything comes together, that big conflict scene, just, oh, it was so short. It was not done justice. There could have been such a cool scene where all of these characters come together. The antagonist and the protagonist have to fight it out and overcome the conflict, and it fizzled out. It was so disappointing. And I almost feel like the publisher was rushing Holly Black to get this book done. It almost feels unfinished. So it's way too short, it's rushed, it feels unfinished, and it's almost like she had to publish it to meet a deadline, and you can definitely tell. So compared to the first 2 books in the series, this one definitely fails in comparison. The next book we have is The Last Star by Rick Yancey. This is book 3 in the Fifth Wave trilogy, which is a YA sci-fi, and this is probably one of the worst books that I have ever read. I liked the fifth wave. I struggled with the Infinite Sea because Rick Yancey decided to completely ignore the main characters that we got to know and care about in book one and focus on completely different characters that, in all honesty, were a bunch of jerks. And in this book, once again, we further follow those characters that are a bunch of jerks. And I didn't like Ringer. I couldn't stand Ringer. I thought she was a horrible character. And in this book, Cassie and Evan, which are the main characters from the first book that are in the second book too, but they're not given as much time. Once again, in this book, they're not given as much time. And Evan's story I found incredibly interesting. The way that the author set up the mystery surrounding Evan's identity, I thought that was really cool. And it just completely fizzled out in book three. And then we have Cassie, who almost like became a self-sacrifice or became a sacrifice in order to resolve this book, and I was not on board with that. And then the thing that really got me the most is that this is a sci-fi alien series. I wanted sci-fi aliens. There were no aliens. These characters never come in contact with aliens. There are no aliens. Oh my gosh, I wanted aliens. I was promised aliens. No aliens. I remember finished reading it. It was on New Year's Eve, and I was so mad at this book because we meandered around. We follow characters who sucked. We got a promise of aliens, and then that was never delivered on. So this book got 1 star for me, and definitely a disappointing finale. Okay, you guys, so that is it for my list of most disappointing finales in a series. Let me know in the comments some of your most disappointing finales. Also, if you've read any of these series and what you thought of them, and I will see y'all soon in another video. Goodbye!